following up Penny. I was actually in the House, very present, when Larissa's bill was brought forth and voted on. And the very, very sad part was there were only 11 members in the House. We were defeated 6-5. Now that is appalling. So I think that politicians need to be held to account and look and learn about what is happening and be prepared to go into the House to vote. I think this was disgusting.
All of her family were born in Kingston South East, and our families have been here forever and belong to this country and have been caring for country for thousands and thousands of years. So I've come here to acknowledge country, because acknowledging country in our culture is very important for us to remember the First Nations peoples of the land and the role that the First Nations peoples play in relationship to country, and the spiritual connections that we have for country. And now we're a different community 200 years later, and it's I want to also acknowledge the work that you're all doing in this movement to share with us in caring for country, because in our culture and tradition, caring for country for future generations is central, because we were always thinking about the 7 generations to come, not just us now. And I think that that's this movement here, is it's not just about us now or making a profit now. It's about ensuring that the water and our environment and food security is secure for us now, but also for our grandchildren. So I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the work that and the struggle ahead for all of us. So as a Mian-Tank Boandik Tungatakard woman from country, I'd like to put that acknowledgement down and share with you in this struggle, and to acknowledge that from my mob we're 150% behind the anti-fracking movement. So let's go forward and let's have a positive result and be thinking about our responsibility as the people who live in this region and are taking care of country now.
Thank you for that wonderful acknowledgement of country, Irene. There's been an immense amount of work, and you should all feel extremely proud of yourselves. You're all our very special guests today. It's our communities, the most special guests here. And we do have 2 other special guests. We have Mark Parnell and Penny Wright from Adelaide have made that commit to the issues. We're quite often faced with articles in the Kingston Leader and other newspapers across the southeast from mining executives and the companies that basically say what we are is a disjointed, irritant rabble that's pretty much ill-informed. But when I look out here, I can see my wife, my partner, I can see my neighbours, I can see very experienced professional farmers, there's doctors and medical people. Does that sound like a rabble? It sounds like very, very concerned citizens who have an immensely large knowledge base. The fact that we quite often read is from the government, the state government, and they basically say this needs to be kept down to facts and science. Well, the facts that I know about the southeast are that it's an absolutely beautiful place. It's absolutely magnificent, and we acknowledge country. We love our country and our land where we live. Also, it is a very prosperous region. It's a very productive region. These are all facts that they seem to ignore. Our water supply is essential to maintaining our prosperity. The many jobs that we have in the southeast are very much linked to the prosperity linked to agriculture and other primary production, the fishing grounds, the bonding upwelling that provides that nutrients, all very, very important. Our top brands, we have some marvellous brands in the area. Like the Limestone Coast has some principally great labelling and marketing names, and they give us an edge and advantage in selling to world markets. Highly in demand. Consider the beautiful Coonawarra wines and the Mount Benson wines. Some of the best meat and livestock in the state comes from this region. So they're all facts, and the mining company principally could jeopardise this. I've recently been watching the Gasland 2 movie, and Professor Ingraffia, I think it's 1 hour, 8 minutes into the movie, talks about well integrity being a major issue. It's almost impossible to ensure well integrity break down. Why aren't they selling that technology to the United States where they're crying out to try and get well integrity improved? Principally that's because they use the same technology. So we do have to be concerned.
The Greens are certainly the outstanding political party in our corner on this one. Mark and Penny Wright have made a special effort to come down from Adelaide today, reorganising their calendar just to be here specially, so we welcome Mark.
Thank you, Will, and I'm conscious I'm behind a sea of street signs. Can you see me better? Is that better? Okay. Now this is where we've got short people, medium-sized people and tall people, but thank you for the invitation to come down today. It's absolutely my pleasure, but what I thought I would do just very briefly is to outline to you what's been happening recently and what's coming up in State Parliament on this issue. I know many of you, probably most of you, signed a petition a month or so back that was calling for two things. It was calling for a moratorium on unconventional gas. It was calling for the permanent protection of farming land and conservation land and urban residential land from gas, and also calling for farmers and local communities to have more say over all forms of mining, including mineral mining, open cut, etc. Over 2,500 people signed that petition, and it was tabled in Parliament 2 weeks ago. Now, certainly if you did sign it, and if you put your address, particularly your email address, on it, you'll get some feedback soon about how that was received and what's happening. But I can tell you that I have reintroduced into State Parliament 2 bills. And a bill is basically just a draft law, and it's something that all MPs will need to vote on. The first bill is aimed fairly and squarely at your communities in the southeast, and it's an amendment to the Petroleum and Geothermal Energy Act. And basically what it says is that there are so many question marks and so many dangers associated with fracking that it is not appropriate in the settled farming areas of South Australia. That's the starting point. Protect our farmland, protect our food bowl, don't allow these unconventional gas activities. It also goes on to say that there's enough question marks that we should really be having a good look at it anywhere in the state. Now, I know they'll be telling you that, oh, we've been doing it in the Cooper Basin forever and it hasn't caused any problems. But, you know, if the Liberal government in Victoria has enough concerns that they've got a moratorium in place, why can't we have a moratorium here and put pressure on the government to make sure that the scientific studies are done so that we don't stuff up our countryside in quest for short-term profit? So that's one of the bills. It's basically saying a 2-year moratorium, a complete ban on fracking in farming land and conservation areas, including your coastal conservation zone, and also the places where people live, in townships and urban zoned areas. The second bill is basically saying that when it comes to other forms of mining, such as open cut, it's not just a matter between the individual landholder and the mining company. There are other important stakeholders, the neighbours, the general community, and these people should also have a say over what happens in their community. And many of you who were on the steps of Parliament a month or two back, and you would have seen people from York Peninsula and people from Eyre Peninsula, they're fighting very similar battles to you, basically trying to get a fair go, trying to get more balance in the debate between essential food-growing industries and what is often very short-term profit-making mining proposals. The one on York's, it's a 15-year mine, and it's going to remove from production thousands of hectares of land forever. Now, do the sums. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's places in the Middle East that have farmed the same plots of land for thousands of years. And yet, for 15 years short-term profit, the government's saying, no, iron ore and copper are just so important to us, we have to extract them from the ground at all costs. And I think you'll find exactly the same arguments with gas. They say, energy security, we need the gas, and we know that it's short-term, we know there's well integrity problems, and we know it's putting your rural lifestyles, your ability to grow food for us at risk. The second thing that's happening in state parliament, so there are two bills. Next Thursday, I've got a motion before Parliament for a parliamentary inquiry into unconventional gas. Now, I know this is something that the 7 local councils that make up this southeast region, I know we're very keen to have a parliamentary inquiry. Every time I'm ready to bring it to a vote, I get a phone call from the Liberals saying, we're not quite ready yet, can you put it off for a while? Well, we've been putting it off for a while now. I'm going to bring it to a vote, and we'll find out whether the old parties are serious about having a proper inquiry. And the beauty of a parliamentary inquiry is that we bring witnesses in. We can bring representatives from your community to come into Parliament and tell us what this industry could mean for you. We can also get academics in, we can get all manner of people in to give evidence on the record in a parliamentary inquiry. It's a really important part of the process, and I'm hoping that the old parties will do the right thing next Thursday. So thank you again for the opportunity to come along, and I'm glad I've been able to fill you in on recent developments. My bills, by the way, will be coming to a vote in November, and you'll certainly be getting communications. If you've signed up to any of the lists, you'll be getting communications about what's needed to actually lobby other members of Parliament to get behind this bill, because it's fair and square, aimed at protecting you and your communities, and in fact the heritage that we want to hand on to all future generations. Thank you very much.
But strange things happen in this now eerie land.
Down what they control and pass the buck back to the state. And certainly what we've seen in Queensland, one example I saw on TV was where the people behind the scenes doing in the public service were told to leave the chapter on water out of the environmental assessment of a particular project. So that is why it's important for the federal government to still have a little bit of a foot in, because we obviously, certainly in the case of Queensland, can't trust the state governments to do the right thing.
Thank you, Will, and good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today. When I heard about this really quite momentous occasion today, I said to my staff, let's look at my calendar, let's work out if I can get down there. This is really important. The reason it's really important is that this is, to me, core Greens work, core Greens values in play, and that's because we are talking about having an environment that's not just there for the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years or 20 years or even 50 years, although it would be really nice to think that we can actually assure ourselves of that. It's about making decisions today that will mean that we have an environment, a sustainable, wonderful way of life for our kids, our grandkids and their kids. This is also about community. They are both core Greens values. It's what we've always been on about. And what I find interesting around Australia is that once these issues become live for people where they're living, they start to understand what we've always been talking about. You talked earlier, Peter, about facts and science. This is the fact that I can't unknow. This is the fact that I am so clear about, and that is that any species that destroys its environment, any species that befouls its nest, is doomed. It just is counterproductive, and that's why you're all out here today, because you know that instinctively. And so when I look out on all of you, I see a really strong community prepared to take leadership. And it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. Give yourselves a clap. It's just great. Good on you. And that's why I felt when I knew this was happening, I wanted to come down and stand with you and support grandkids and their kids. This is also about community. They are both, and that's why I felt when I knew this was happening, I wanted to come down and stand with you and support you. I'm really proud to be standing next to Mark Parnell, my state colleague, who I also happen to be married to, for those of you who don't know. Some people know, some people don't. I kept my own name, but it's no big secret. Because, in fact, Will, there's a big role, a big potential role for the federal government in this as well. And I like to think that in the Greens we have a pincer movement happening here. We're attacking this on the state level, where there's certainly lots of work that Mark's doing, but we can also approach this on a federal level as well. And that's because you might remember that Tony Abbott, in a moment of lapse of attention and actually probably going somewhere with his heart instead of his political instincts, actually said that he thinks it should be reasonable that landowners can actually say no to mining on their land. People who've been mining land for generations should have the ability to decide what happens on their land. Do you remember him saying that? He said that some time ago, and he's been held to account by that with the Greens since then, and he's now resiled from it. But in this state, in the federal parliament, in the Senate, my colleague Larissa Waters, the environment spokesperson for the Greens, has been working on this issue for 4 years now. She's seen it happen in her state of Queensland. She's seen the tentacles coming down to New South Wales, and of course now it has arrived in South Australia and across the border in Victoria. And Larissa actually introduced a landholder's right to say no bill, draft legislation, and it was really interesting that, surprise, surprise, neither of the old parties was prepared to support it. Because what I want to say to you, and another reason, the main reason I came down to support you today, is that it's only people power that will actually win this one. It's by you people saying, this is the line, you can go so far and no further, we're going to stand up for this now. So as politicians, we will support you in that, but don't rely on the old parties, don't rely on governments, don't just hear what they say, look at what they do. Get people in who will support you, and you can win this as a community. You can win this, and you will be leaders for the other people who are facing this throughout Australia. I have a copy of the speech that I made in relation to Larissa's bill, the Landholders' Right to Say No bill. I've got other information about the work that I'm doing, and I'm really interested in hearing from you to see how we can continue to support you. I can just see this growing and moving and changing, and you getting your message out, because you're standing with people across Australia, I know that, in what you're doing, and just take away this message. What you are standing up for is right. Thank you very much.
Now, Andor would like to say a quick word. Most of you, I think, know who Andor is, but I suppose the first and main thing, well, there's two main things about Anne. The first thing is, I still think that most of us wouldn't even know that unconventional gas was happening in the Limestone Coast if it wasn't for Anne. And the second thing is, well, hopefully she might slow down a little bit, but she seems to work 24/7.
My speech. I'm going to make a comment following up Penny. I was actually in the House, very present, when Larissa's bill was brought forth and voted on. And the very, very sad part was there were only 11 members in the House. We were defeated 6-5. Now that is appalling. So I think that politicians need to be held to account and look and learn about what is happening and be prepared to go into the House to vote. I think 3,500 lock the gate signs up on people's gates around the southeast. I would like to congratulate the Robe District Council and Mayor Peter Risley on becoming the first council in South Australia to declare themselves Gasfield and invasive mining free. Thank you so much, Peter, for all your work. I especially thank Will Legault and fellow committee members of the Limestone Coast Protection Alliance, as well as our members, for their commitment, dedication, help and love in this important fight to protect our precious agricultural land.
Actually ended up suspending the licence of this planned exploratory well in Bentley, which is wonderful. The ALP responded by announcing, if they are elected, that they would declare the Northern Rivers Gasfield free. How good is that? That's wonderful. However, they omitted the inclusion of the Clarence Valley, which is part of the Northern Rivers. And that is because the communities, there were fewer communities in that region who are not engaging and working towards their gas-fuel-free communities. So hence, guess what the Clarence Valley are doing? They're out there now hustling to be gas-fuel-free in their neighbouring regions. So the important message is that community engagement and working together is how we can protect our limestone coast, how we can defend our limestone coast region.